The US State Department has called for the release of 11 citizen journalists who were imprisoned for exposing the severity of the pandemic in China. The 11 people who are followers of Falun Dafa, a spiritual discipline banned in China, were arrested on July 19, 2020 and indicted in April this year for uploading photos to an overseas website, a Chinese version of the Epoch Times. Afterwards, they were charged as undermining law enforcement with a cult organization, which is a standard pretext used by the Chinese courts to criminalize Falun Gong practitioners. The Chinese regime are tightly controlling information related to the pandemic, such as its harsh lockdown policies, as well as the true infection and death toll figures. US State Department stated in an email to the Epoch Times that a free and independent media, including citizen journalists, is essential to making government more accountable, keeping all of us safer from future outbreaks and possible pandemics. Whistleblower doctors, academics, and citizen journalists have been punished by the regime for disseminating unfiltered information on the outbreak or criticizing the CCP's policies. One of the 11 detained is Ms. Xu Na, who has been denied access to her lawyer since last May. Ms. Xu is a poet and freelance painter who lost her husband to the persecution of Falun Gong more than a decade ago. Both were arrested for their faith before the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Her husband, Zhu Zhao, a popular folk musician, was tortured to death less than 2 weeks into his detention. During Ms. Xu's first detention at the Beijing Women's Prison in 2001, she experienced various forms of torture, which include being forced to remain in snow for long periods, sleep deprivation, slave labor, solitary confinement, being tied up in excruciatingly painful positions, repeated force feedings, and brutal beatings. She later wrote an article expressing, "How I wish I was imprisoned in an Auschwitz concentration camp, not a Chinese prison. Because in the Nazi gas chamber, people can die quickly. But in the Beijing women's prison, it's worse to be alive than dead. Repeatedly, you go through long sessions of torture." She continues, "The purpose of the Nazis' persecution was to destroy the body of the Jews. But the purpose of the CCP's persecution is to destroy the spirit and conscience of the people." Beijing People's Court cancelled the detainee's scheduled court appearance on August the 19th. After a decade in Chinese jails since the persecution started, Ms. Xu and the other 10 still remain locked up, deprived of their freedom of belief, a right that is guaranteed by the Chinese Constitution.